Hi, class. Welcome to the first lecture, chapter 1. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get right down to it. Okay. Hopefully I can hit this slideshow and it will work. Okay. Ooh, went a little too far. Okay, well, this is the first chapter and it's going to be chapter 1. And these are the objectives for this chapter. For the test, you'll be asked to be able to describe physiological psychology, describe the types and structure of neurons and glia, and so on. In this lecture, I'm just going to cover objectives 1 and 2. Okay, so be able to describe physiological psychology. So the question is, what is this class that you're in? What is this area, physiological psychology? And physiological psychology basically describes or studies the relationship between biology and psychology. What are the ways in which the brain and the endocrine system and our bodies help us to have the thoughts and emotions and behaviors that we study in psychology? So what's the connection there? That's what we'll be studying in this class. So ask yourself this: can physical exercise improve brain function? And the answer is true. Physical exercise does. Are children less attentive after eating sugar? Are they real hyperactive? False. Not true. See what you know about physiological psychology. Are some people incapable of feeling pain? True. Is listening to classical music make babies smarter? Sorry. Our scientists aren't exactly sure what makes antidepressant drugs work. All these people on drugs, do they know how they work? True, they do not know how they work. They're not exactly sure. And we'll talk about that in this class. Sleepwalkers are acting out dreams? Absolutely not. They are not. We'll find that out in the sleep chapter. During sleep, does the brain shut down? Absolutely not. It's very active during sleep. Some human nerves are over 3 feet long. Yes, true. They go all the way down our legs and they go a very long way, some of them. Testosterone is made only by men. Estrogen is made only by females. Absolutely false. Our bodies make substances similar to heroin and cannabis. Yep, that's why they work, and we'll find that out in chapter 3. Each memory is stored in separate brain cells. Not true. Memories are stored all throughout the brain in different interconnected ways. We'll find that out soon. Each side of the brain controls muscles on the opposite side of the body. You may know this. True. We call that contralateral control. Memories are accurate accounts of past experiences. Absolutely not. Students have different learning styles and should be taught differently. Everyone believes this, right? But it's false. Okay. Well, let's get into objective number 2. Describing the types and the structure of neurons and glia. So first off, what are these things? Neurons are basically, okay, so there's 2 types of cells in the nervous system. We're going to be talking about the nervous system and the cells of the nervous system, okay? And there are 2 types of cells in the nervous system. One is neurons, and neurons send and receive information to other neurons. And to do that, they use electrochemical signals. You got electricity there, you got chemicals there. Glia is another type of cell that is involved, but they don't typically send messages, although we're starting to find out that they do send some messages. But mainly they transfer chemicals. For example, neurons need glucose to survive, and they also support neurons structurally. And we'll learn more about those types of cells as well. Mainly we'll be concentrating on neurons, though, in this class. Okay, so what are some types of neurons? Here are some different types of neurons. So you can kind of see the basic structure of the neuron here. It's always got this thing here called a cell body. And inside that cell body, we're going to see a little nucleus there. And the nucleus, as you probably remember from biology a long time ago, contains your DNA. There's always going to be one long, thick structure coming off, and that is called the axon. In all 3 of those, you have the axon. And then you have some branch-like structures here, and we call those the dendrites. Now, neurons take a lot of different forms. They look a lot different, but they almost all act pretty much the same way. So here you see bipolar because you have 2 poles coming off of the cell body. Here you have 1 pole coming off the cell body, so therefore unipolar and multipolar. Okay, here you can see the structure of a mouse nervous system, and here you see neurons are going to be in green and the glial cells will be in red and blue, and you can see that there's really many fewer neurons than glial cells here. You see a lot of glial cells. The glial cells again are providing support and structure and nourishment to neurons, so there are quite a bit of those. Okay. So let's go back to either the neuron or the glial cell, but we're going to start talking very soon about just neurons, because again, we're going to concentrate on neurons, and then we'll cover some stuff about glial cells as well. But it doesn't matter if it's a neuron, a glial cell, a skin cell, a cell of your liver, a cell of your heart, all animal cells have the same kinds of things to a certain extent, but neurons are just shaped a little bit differently. So all animal cells have a membrane, and that is a surrounding structure that keeps the cell different from whatever is around it. So it's kind of like the skin of the cell, and it's made up of fat, and that fat, that lipid structure or fatty structure has some protein channels that will move things inside and out of the cell. And we'll talk about that because there are various things coming in and out of the cell all the time. The nucleus, as I mentioned, is in that cell body there, and that's going to contain DNA or the genetics of the cell. Mitochondria are some structures that, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, provide energy using glucose and oxygen, and they're going to create the energy up for the cell. And so you can think of these as mitochondria, right? Because they give the cell that energy that it needs. And then we're going to see some ribosomes and endoplasmic reticulum, and those make and transport proteins respectively. So the ribosomes are going to make proteins, the endoplasmic reticulum is going to transport proteins. Here you see a bunch of different parts of the cell. Here you can see that endoplasmic reticulum. Remember that that's transporting proteins. Here's the nucleus with the DNA in there. And you see some mitochondria. Remember mitochondria, those are the powerhouse of the cell. Here's your cell membrane that's got your, there's that fatty structure that kind of keeps the contents of the cell inside, lets some things in and out. Here's your ribosomes. We talked about our protein makers. Okay, now neurons are a little different than other cells. They also have a cell body. We also call that a soma sometimes, contains a nucleus, contains a DNA. In this neuron, here is the cell body there in red, and it's just this part here, not all these dendrites. At any rate, it's got that nucleus inside, contains the DNA. And then you have all these branches around that, in this case, because this is a multipolar neuron. And it's going to, these dendrites are going to be the receivers of information. They take in some chemical information you're going to see as we move along in this class. So they receive information. They have spines on them, kind of like little branches, and they also have receptors on those spines. And so receptors receive, right? They take in. The axon here is that long branching structure that is a thicker tree-like root that comes out, and that is going to send information out. So you're going to get information coming in here and being sent out this way. It always goes in that direction. And here in green, we have what's called the myelin sheath, and that is a covering over the axon. And what it does is it insulates. It's made up of fats and proteins. It covers some axons, especially the really long ones, and it insulates the axon. Now, what we're going to see is that the axon is going to shoot an electrical charge through. So just like on an electrical cord, say for your computer or something like that, you have some rubber on it that insulates that electricity, that keeps it flowing through there without losing power. There are some what we call little breaks here. Those are called nodes of Ranvier, and those are breaks in that myelin sheath, and we're going to see that those play important functions when it comes to sending information as well. And we'll see that later. But just know for right now, they're just these little breaks in the myelin sheath. There is a presynaptic terminal that we call here, or we sometimes label that the end bulb. And that's where the axon is going to release a chemical, a neurotransmitter. And so here's a video here. If you, when you get on the lecture online, you might want to look at that video, and it gives you a little picture of how it all works. Okay, well, so the question is, what happens here with experience? And so what we find is that experience is, hold on. Okay, let me call you back. Bye. So experience affects brain structure here because dendrites continue to grow and retract throughout life. And the growth is based on use, and that is based on basically experience. So if you're using a lot of your brain, if you're really using it, and we'll talk about that later, exercising, movement, thinking, all of that, your brain actually grows, and it does that throughout life. And so people who are in enriched environments tend to have more dendritic growth than people in impoverished environments where you see a much more of a kind of a shrinking of those dendrites. So we definitely want to get lots of stimulation so we can get our brains growing. Okay, some other neuron terms here. Afferent is bringing information in. And that is in the case of, for example, a sensory neuron or a dendrite, that's bringing information in. So afferent means bringing information into the nervous system, into a neuron, but it's always the going in. So anything going up to the brain, let's say if I touch my finger, the neurons are sending information up to my brain, that is bringing information in. Efferent is sending information out. And so that would be, for example, a motor neuron would be efferent. It sends information out. So if my brain says, wave your hand, it's sending information out to the motor neuron. Or an axon, you could say an axon because it sends an electrical message out, that we would call that an efferent structure. Okay, now there's a mnemonic that I use here, which is sensory afferent motor efferent, or the word same. Sensory neurons are going into the brain, so they're afferent, and motor neurons are going out from the brain, and so they're efferent. Okay, let's talk about some types of glia. There are 5 types of glia I want to talk about. One is called astrocytes. Astrocytes are really, really common in the brain. And they're named, it's called the astro because it's named as a star, from a star. And they provide nutrients by controlling blood flow. They remove waste. They also synchronize neuron activity. Oligodendrocytes are in the brain and spinal cord. They are going to build myelin. And the myelin, remember, helps insulate the charge on the axon. So so we have an autoimmune disease called multiple sclerosis, and it attacks the myelin. And when the myelin goes, it's really hard for that neuron, that axon, to keep that charge. And so we get some motor problems and problems with movement when the myelin is being attacked like that. The Schwann cells are also involved in building myelin, but the difference between the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann cells is that the oligodendrocytes build myelin in the brain and spinal cord, and the Schwann cells will build myelin in the body. And the Schwann cells, what we'll see later on when we talk about recovery from brain damage, is that the Schwann cells are also very good at guiding axons after damage. So this summer I cut my finger really bad. I actually cut it in a blender that was actually blending. And it was a real straight cut, but it went way through my finger. So what happened is, as it grew back, it might have cut through some axons, but as it grew back together, the skin grew back together, those Schwann cells kind of line up and they help the axons to regrow so that I get the feeling back in my finger. Initially, I didn't have any feeling in my finger, but it did come back, thanks to my Schwann cells. and those are in the body, not in the brain. Radial glia kind of radiate out, and they are present when you're a very little baby, and you're basically, what's happening is you're getting all these new neurons, and they're all being produced in the center of your brain, and they're having to move out to the various sites. Some of them are going to end up out here, and some of them are going to end up in other places, and they've got to kind of go along these little glial cells. The glial cells provide a path for them to migrate. And then finally, the microglia. And the microglia are involved in, they're kind of the immune system of the brain. They remove waste, they remove viruses, although they're not very good at it, so you don't want a virus in your brain. Funguses, fungi, they are just kind of the cleanup crew of the brain. Okay, so test yourself here and ask yourself, what do these glial cells do? Okay, and with that, I am going to stop sharing and end this session, and we'll get back to objective 3 next time.